Madison Square Garden, New York City, October 2nd, 1983. Outside, the crisp autumn air carried the first whispers of winter. But inside the legendary arena, 25,000 souls generated enough collective warmth to create their own climate. The air was electric, charged with anticipation so palpable it seemed to vibrate through the concrete foundations of the building itself. This was no ordinary concert. This was the final night of the six-show New York leg of the record-breaking Thriller Tour, already being hailed by critics as the most spectacular musical production ever mounted. But even those who had attended previous nights sensed something different in the atmosphere. Whispers had been circulating all day about a special guest, someone whose presence would elevate this already historic event into something transcendent. The arena had been in darkness for exactly 8 minutes and 43 seconds, an eternity in the heightened emotional state of a pre-show crowd. The anticipation had built to an almost unbearable pitch. The crowd's collective breath held so long that the very air seemed to thicken with tension. Some clutched tickets that had cost a week's salary. Others wore homemade outfits replicating Michael's iconic red leather jacket or single white glove. All were united in the knowledge that they existed in the eye of a cultural hurricane, a moment in time that future generations would speak of with reverence. A single beam of white light suddenly pierced the darkness, illuminating nothing but floating dust particles that danced in its harsh glow. Then another joined it, then another, creating a choreography of light that searched the arena like celestial spotlights seeking something or someone of transcendent importance. The opening synthesizer notes of "Wanna Be Startin' Something" exploded through the sound system with such clarity and force that many felt it in their chest cavities before their ears registered the sound. The lights suddenly converged on a solitary figure that had materialized at center stage, as if conjured from the collective desire of 25,000 beating hearts. Michael Jackson stood motionless for 3 perfect beats, allowing the roar of recognition to wash over him before launching into the performance that would redefine what was possible in live entertainment. For the next 2 hours, Michael commanded the stage with supernatural precision. Each movement, each note, each carefully choreographed sequence executed with such perfection that it seemed to exist outside the realm of human capability. The audience was entranced, caught in the spell of witnessing something they intrinsically understood they would measure all future experiences against. They didn't just watch the performance. They lived inside it, became part of it, their energy feeding Michael's seemingly boundless reservoir of creative power. As "Beat It" concluded, the arena still reverberating with the last notes of Eddie Van Halen's guitar solo that had been perfectly synchronized with Michael's final dance sequence. The lights dimmed but didn't go out completely. This wasn't part of the carefully choreographed show that had been performed with clockwork precision on previous nights. The band members exchanged glances, momentarily uncertain, but professionals enough not to show it. A curious murmur rippled through the crowd. Something unplanned was happening. Michael stepped to the edge of the stage, his chest still heaving from the exertion of the previous number. Sweat glistened on his face under the subdued lighting, but his eyes remained clear and focused, windows to the soul of an artist operating at the absolute zenith of his powers. He raised a hand, and somehow, through some alchemy of charisma and earned authority, the entire arena fell into an expectant hush. "New York," Michael said, his speaking voice so rarely heard during performances that its softness startled many in the audience. "You've been incredible." The crowd roared in appreciation, but Michael raised his hand again, and once more the arena quieted with surprising immediacy. "Tonight is special," he continued. "The final night of our time together in this legendary venue. And I couldn't let it pass without acknowledging someone who's been more than an inspiration to me. Someone who showed me what was possible when you pour your entire soul into music." The crowd's anticipation sharpened, a collective leaning forward that was almost physical. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael said, his voice gaining strength, "I'd like to invite to the stage a man who taught me that music isn't something you create, it's something you channel. Please welcome my friend, my mentor, my brother in music, Mr. Stevie Wonder. The response was seismic. 25,000 people rising to their feet in a spontaneous standing ovation before Stevie Wonder had played a single note. From stage left, guided gently by an assistant who departed as soon as Stevie oriented himself, the legendary musician appeared. He wore a crisp white suit that contrasted beautifully with his deep brown skin, his signature braids adorned with small wooden beads that clicked softly as he moved. His smile, that radiant, joyful expression that seemed to come from some bottomless well of genuine happiness, was already in place, as if he'd been smiling backstage in anticipation of this moment. The applause intensified as Michael walked over to greet him, embracing him with a warmth that transcended the performative gestures often seen between celebrities on stage. There was history here, respect, a genuine connection that couldn't be manufactured. As they embraced, Michael whispered something in Stevie's ear that caused the older artist to laugh and nod in agreement. What the audience couldn't know, what would only be revealed years later in an interview, was that Michael had said simply, "Let's show them what music is really about." A piano had been wheeled to center stage during the applause. Stevie settled himself behind it with the practiced ease of someone who had made the instrument an extension of his own body decades ago. Michael stood nearby, suddenly transformed from the commanding presence that had dominated the arena moments before into something altogether different, a student in the presence of a master, a disciple awaiting wisdom. Stevie's fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, a brief communion between artist and instrument before he began to play. The opening chords were gentle, exploratory, as if Stevie was having a private conversation with the piano that the audience was privileged to overhear. There was no announcement of what he would play, no introduction needed. For those first few measures, it wasn't even clear if this was a planned performance or simply a musical meditation. Then, with a subtle shift in tempo and key, the introduction revealed itself as a unique arrangement of "You Are the Sunshine of My Life," familiar enough to be recognized, but reimagined in a way that made it feel like the audience was hearing it for the first time. When Stevie began to sing, something extraordinary happened in Madison Square Garden. The perpetual background noise that exists in any gathering of 25,000 people, the whispers, the shifting in seats, the thousand tiny sounds of human existence, faded to absolute silence. Each word, each note seemed to float in the air, crystalline and perfect, before dissolving into the next. This wasn't just technical perfection, though Stevie's voice remained one of the great instruments in popular music. This was something more profound, the direct transmission of pure emotion through sound. Michael stood nearby, no longer the superstar headliner, but simply a witness to this alchemy. Those closest to the stage, and those watching the massive screens that ensured even the furthest seats could see the performance, noticed a shift in his expression. The carefully maintained performance mask had slipped, replaced by something raw and unguarded. His eyes glistened in the stage lights. As the song approached its bridge, Stevie's playing became more expansive, his voice reaching towards something transcendent. Without any visible cue, he shifted slightly on the piano bench, making space in an invitation that needed no words. Michael moved to sit beside him, two musical giants sharing a single bench in a moment of rare vulnerability before 25,000 witnesses. What happened next would be described for decades by those fortunate enough to be present. Stevie transitioned seamlessly into Music and Me, an early Michael Jackson solo song from 1973 that had not been a major hit but held special significance for both artists. It was a song about the personal, almost sacred relationship between a musician and music itself, not the business, not the fame, but the pure act of creation and expression. As Stevie sang the first verse, his voice imbued the decade-old lyrics with new depth and meaning. Then, in a moment of perfect artistic symmetry, Michael joined in, his higher, clearer tone blending with Stevie's soulful richness to create something greater than either voice alone could produce. The harmony was unplanned but flawless, as if these two voices had been destined to join together from the moment they were first formed. By the second chorus, something shifted in Michael's demeanor. Those watching the screens could see it clearly, the careful composure giving way to raw emotion. A single tear tracked down his cheek, catching the light before falling. He made no move to wipe it away or hide it. Instead, he closed his eyes and surrendered completely to the moment, to the music, to the rare experience of performing not as the focus of attention, but as part of something larger than himself. Stevie, though unable to see Michael's tears, sensed the emotion in his voice and responded to it, his own performance deepening in response. The song built toward its final chorus, both voices now fully committed to this unexpected journey they were taking together. As the final notes faded, the arena remained in perfect silence for 3 heartbeats, a silence so complete it seemed almost solid. Then, like a dam breaking, the applause erupted with a force that seemed to physically push against the stage. People were on their feet, many openly weeping, others embracing strangers beside them, all united in the awareness that they had witnessed something beyond entertainment, something approaching the sacred. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold moments from Michael's life that reveal the man behind the legend, the human being whose capacity for emotion matched his extraordinary talent. Michael and Stevie embraced again, Michael whispering something that caused Stevie to nod solemnly and squeeze his shoulder in response. The moment might have ended there, a beautiful, unplanned interlude in an otherwise meticulously choreographed show. But Stevie wasn't finished. He turned back to the piano, his fingers finding the keys with unerring precision, and began to play something new, something no one in the audience had heard before. Later, in interviews, Stevie would reveal that what followed was completely improvised, created in that moment as a gift to Michael and to the audience that had received their previous performance with such open hearts. "I wanted to give Michael something he hadn't rehearsed, hadn't prepared for," Stevie explained. "To let him experience music as pure discovery, the way it was before the world's expectations weighed so heavily on him. What emerged was a melody of haunting beauty, neither fully major nor minor, flowing through key changes that felt inevitable despite their complexity." Without using words, Stevie somehow conveyed the story of a journey, from innocence through struggle to a kind of hard-won peace. Those with musical training would later marvel at the technical brilliance of the composition created in real time. But what touched the audience that night was something simpler and more profound, the pure emotional narrative that transcended technique. After establishing the melody and harmonic structure, Stevie began to vocalize, not singing lyrics, but using his voice as another instrument, adding another layer to the sonic tapestry he was weaving. And then, in a moment that seemed to stop time itself, he did something unexpected. He reached out his hand toward where he knew Michael was standing and wiggled his fingers in invitation. Michael hesitated for just a moment, visibly uncertain. This wasn't part of the show. There was no choreography to fall back on, no rehearsed vocals, no safety net of preparation. Stevie was asking him to step into pure improvisation before 25,000 witnesses. For an artist known for perfectionism, for meticulous control of every aspect of his performance, this represented a kind of artistic risk that went against every instinct. The audience held its collective breath, and then Michael stepped forward and took Stevie's hand. What followed transcended the boundaries of conventional performance. Without words, without planning, 2 musical geniuses began to communicate through pure sound. Michael began to vocalize alongside Stevie, finding harmonies and counter-melodies that intertwined with Stevie's creation. Then, unable to contain the music within vocal expression alone, Michael began to move. Not the choreographed precision of his usual performance, but something organic and spontaneous, physical expressions of the emotions evoked by Stevie's playing. At one point, Michael moved behind the piano, his hand resting lightly on Stevie's shoulder, creating a physical connection that seemed to complete a circuit between them. As Stevie played a particularly moving passage, Michael's free hand rose to his face, tears now flowing freely. But these weren't tears of sadness, as became clear when Michael looked up and the massive screens captured his expression of pure joy, of liberation, of homecoming. One of his backup singers would later describe it as watching someone remember who they really are beneath all the layers of fame and expectation. For nearly 10 minutes, an eternity in the context of a tightly scheduled arena show, this improvised communion between two musical giants continued, building to an emotional crescendo before gradually finding its way to a resolution that felt both surprising and inevitable. As the final notes faded into silence, Michael knelt beside the piano bench and embraced Stevie with a spontaneous fervor that spoke of gratitude beyond words. The arena erupted again, the applause now mixed with audible sobs as the emotional impact of what they had witnessed washed through the crowd in waves. People who had come expecting to be entertained found themselves moved in ways they hadn't anticipated, touched by something that transcended the boundaries between performer and audience, between art and life. When Michael finally rose and stepped forward to address the audience, his face was still wet with tears, but he made no attempt to hide or explain them. Instead, he simply said, "That's what it's all about, isn't it? That's why we're here." He turned to Stevie, who remained seated at the piano, his own face reflecting the emotional journey they had shared. "Thank you for reminding me." The two embraced once more before Stevie was escorted off stage, the audience continuing to applaud long after he had disappeared from view. In that moment of transition, something beautiful happened spontaneously in Madison Square Garden. As if moved by a single impulse, the audience began to sing the chorus of "You Are the Sunshine of My Life." 25,000 voices joined in an impromptu tribute to what they had just witnessed. Michael stood at the edge of the stage, visibly moved by this unexpected response. For nearly a minute, he simply listened, allowing himself to be serenaded by the audience in a reversal of the usual performer-audience dynamic. Then, with a gesture to his band, he joined in, turning what might have been a brief interlude into a full audience participation moment that united everyone in the arena in shared creation. The remainder of the concert continued according to the planned set list, but something fundamental had shifted in the energy of the performance. The invisible barrier that typically exists between performer and audience, even with a performer as skilled a connection as Michael Jackson, had dissolved completely. Each song that followed seemed infused with additional meaning, the elaborate production elements and virtuosic dance sequences serving the emotional truth rather than merely showcasing spectacular talent. When the final encore concluded and Michael took his last bow, the audience remained in place, reluctant to break the spell of what they had experienced together. Many lingered in their seats long after the house lights came up, speaking in hushed tones about what they had witnessed. Outside the arena, fans gathered in spontaneous circles, some singing Stevie's songs, others attempting to describe to friends who hadn't been present the transformation they had seen in Michael's face when Stevie's voice had moved him to tears. In the days that followed, the Stevie Wonder interlude was mentioned in reviews almost as a footnote. Jackson was also joined by Stevie Wonder for an unplanned duet, the words inadequate to capture what had transpired in that sacred space between artist and audience. Those who had been present, however, understood they had witnessed something that transcended entertainment, something that couldn't be adequately conveyed through description. It had to be experienced to be understood. That night altered something in Michael's subsequent performances. While the production remained as spectacular as ever, those who had followed the tour closely noticed subtle changes. Moments of increased spontaneity, small deviations from the rigid structure that had previously governed every second of the show. His longtime choreographer would later reveal that after the New York shows, Michael had asked for certain sections of the performance to be left less defined, spaces for something unexpected to happen. The piano used during Stevie's performance didn't continue with the tour as planned. Instead, at Michael's request, it was donated to the music program at the Harlem School of the Arts, along with funding for 10 years of scholarships. The only condition attached to the gift was a small plaque affixed to the instrument that read simply, "Music lives in the space between the notes." Remember to listen for it. MJ and SW. 17 years later, long after both men had weathered personal storms that tested their resilience and transformed their public images, they found themselves together again at a tribute concert celebrating Stevie's lifetime contribution to music. Backstage, away from cameras and public eyes, Michael embraced his old friend and whispered, "Madison Square Garden, 1983. You saved me that night." Stevie, with the wisdom that had always characterized him both as artist and human being, replied simply, "No, Michael. The music saved us both. It always has." Today, in the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, visitors can find a small display dedicated to unexpected moments of musical transcendence. There, alongside other artifacts of Black musical excellence, rests a single white glove, the one Michael wore that night at Madison Square Garden. Beside it lies a wooden bead from Stevie's hair, donated by the artist himself. Between them, a small card bears a quote from an audience member who was present that legendary night. For a few minutes, we all remembered what music is really for. Not entertainment, not fame, not business. Connection. Pure human connection. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the transformative power of music, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the moments when Michael Jackson transcended stardom to reveal his deepest humanity. Because in the end, it wasn't the record sales or the dance moves or the spectacular productions that defined his legacy. It was these rare glimpses of his soul, moments when the armor fell away, and we saw the human being behind the icon, as vulnerable and moved by beauty as any of us.